Hey, what's going on, everybody? And welcome back to Cinema Crusaders. Halloween movie madness rolls on. And this week, we're talking about a classic, a science fiction and horror staple. It wasn't well received when it first came out, so it'll be interesting to talk about that. But first, before I introduce the film, I want to introduce you to my co host. He's my fellow co host on Sloppy Spoilers. He's an artist of his own right, very talented man who just released a incredible picture on his Twitter. So make sure to follow that and check it out. I am talking about none other than my good friend, Jeff Bracey. How you doing, Jeff?
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks for the prompt. Anybody who hasn't been following me, you should know that every day of the month of October, I've been releasing either a piece of art theme for the occasion or a link to one of the short horror films I've made in my brief time as a filmmaker.
Outstanding. Yeah, I love the picture that you just put up. It's really cool. In fact, it reminds me of the person that we interviewed last night, who the interview will be up on early in the week, which is Ben Templesmith. It really did remind me of that quite a bit. So
I believe I actually did that piece of art around the time that I was very much involved with the Spawn.com forums and the place where I got to know Ben. So yeah, it was a very productive time hanging out with all those cool and creepy artists and art fans back in the early 2000s.
very cool. So to introduce the movie that we're talking about today, if you haven't already guessed by the background behind us and what you can see, we're talking about none other than 1982's John Carpenter's The Thing. It is a remake of an earlier movie based on a novella from the 1930s. We're going to get all into the cast, the production, the practical effects, which are a huge part of this movie, but also the production value. And then we're going to close off this pod by talking about its relevance to today's audiences. But I think I want to go back and talk about how poorly received the movie was when it first came out and how art can change over time as well. So, because I think that's a big thing with this. But before I do that, just to give you guys an idea of the flavor of the film, if you haven't seen this film, I got the trailer queued up for the movie. So we're going to go ahead and watch that real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about it. Here
Excellent.
we go.
48 hours ago, we found something quite remarkable.
What'd they find?
There's a structure
In Antarctica.
and a
Oh.
specimen.
Oh,
Really?
I'm sorry, I got the wrong thing
wrong
downloaded. So
trailer.
I will download the right one eventually. Maybe we'll get to it later.
This is what happens when you name your prequel the exact same thing as the film it's prequeling.
Yeah. So I will get the proper one, and then we'll get that up for you in a minute. But let's go ahead and kick off the talking points here about the movie. And usually I'm the one who introduces the movie, but I'm going to go ahead and look for that trailer real quick. So Jeff, if you could give our audience a brief synopsis of what this movie is about for everybody who hasn't seen it, that'd be great. I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, just to give a little bit more of a preface, this is based off of a short story, a novella called "Who Goes There." You can find it online if you want to read it. It's very much worth reading. Which spawned a film in the 50s starring James Arness as the monster called The Thing, or The Thing from Another World. And this is a reimagining of that movie, which is actually very much in line with the short story that's based on. Whereas the Thing from Another World, they couldn't do shape-changing monsters back then. So James Arness is a plant-based alien life form that needs blood to survive. The premise of The Thing is it's very much in the vein of Lovecraft's cosmic horror. And in fact, this is part of John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, what he calls 3 movies that deal with the potential end of the world in their scenarios. Some people working out in Antarctica, they discover a ship that has crash landed deep into the polar ice thousands and thousands of years ago. And they think they found a deceased extraterrestrial, but what they don't understand is the biology of this creature allows it to survive a deep freeze and, in fact, reconstitute itself because it has this amazing cellular structure that allows it to absorb creatures and imitate them perfectly, right down to your behavioral and thought patterns, because it just eats you up cell by cell. So not only is it a great horrific monster movie because this thing can adapt to these environments and anything it's got in its genetic catalog, it can appear. You know, it'll grow claws, tentacles, fangs, teeth, whatever it needs to survive and adapt. On top of that, because it produces these perfect imitations that act as any of its victims would have, or has, you know, the knowledge to do so, it's a really tight psychological thriller on top of it being a monster movie, because it's the ultimate game of paranoia, like who's the thing and who's not. An utterly terrifying situation. People and the best case scenario for like the isolation horror, as so many horror movies are set up in that place. Like, you've got to have a group of people who are vastly isolated away from help of any sort, and it doesn't get much more remote than the middle of Antarctica.
Just a side note real quick to add to that. Later on, you know, almost a decade later, the X-Files would really use this as well when they did their movies. They really pulled from what they had done with this idea that stuff is buried under the ice, you know. So
that was a really great episode. I know the episode you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, they did that in their feature film as well.
That's true. That's true.
So I have pulled up the appropriate thing trailer now. So let's go ahead and check that out real quick, and then we will get right into our usual format. So here we go. The appropriate 1982 The Thing trailer. Here we go.
This is U.S. Station 31. You read me? Found something in the ice. We need some help down here. Can anybody hear me? We found something. We found something. We found something.
12 men have just discovered something. For 100,000 years, it was buried in the snow and ice. Now it has found a place to live. Inside. Where no one can see it, or hear it, or feel it.
I know I'm human. Some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to, but it's vulnerable out in the open. If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's won.
You guys gonna listen to Gary? He can beat one of those things!
Love that tagline at the end.
Yeah, it is. Wow, what a great trailer, man. I'm hyped up to watch the movie again after seeing that.
This is a film I've watched dozens upon dozens of times. Unlike some of the other films we talk about, this is, for me, this film is a real masterclass in so many genres, even though it's the horror genre. It's the thriller genre. It's very Hitchcockian in its layers of like the whodunit. The suspense is masterful. It's
science fiction.
Yeah,
great science fiction elements.
It's
great cast.
Yeah, it's so wealth-wrenching on so many levels, and it just shows the real genius of Carpenter. And as you said, it's a real shame that this didn't catch on right away. And for my money, it's because the gore effects were just too much for people at the time.
Yeah. I think there's a number of different things, but we'll go ahead and we'll get into that. But like I said, the cast was amazing. Just to give you a brief background, one of the things I love is that, you know, let's start right in the production value. But This movie comes out right around the same time, a few years after Halloween. But back then, you notice the credits. They're very simple, but they're kind of eerie in their simplicity. And the same thing with Halloween when John Carpenter, early in his career, everything was John Carpenter's whatever. John Carpenter's a thing, John Carpenter's Halloween. So you knew exactly what you're getting into right away. John Carpenter was already a name. And he'd go on to do, the early 80s also gave us Escape from New York.
Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah. So, I mean,
later on, he would do really cool things like Memoirs of an Invisible Man with Chevy Chase. He's a master craftsman.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much, I will admit completely that I'm a John Carpenter fan. I love almost everything he's done. But, you even look at stuff that he did later on. One of my favorites that he did is John Carpenter's Vampires, with James Woods.
Terrific.
So great. Another great movie.
There's only one movie of his that I watched that I didn't like.
What's that?
That was Ghosts of Mars, because that was a retread of Escape from New York meets Assault on Precinct 13.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, that was supposed to be a Snake Plissken movie, where like they'd moved it far enough into the future they were going to put all their convicts on Mars. And if you look at Ice Cube's character in that, he's wearing the leather jacket, the camouflage pants, and his name is Desolation Jones. So Snake Plissken analog all the way.
Well, wait a minute, Desolation Jones. I wonder if that's any relation to the trans character from Escape from L.A. Wasn't that like now I got to go back and watch.
Yeah, I got to watch that again because I forgot. I didn't really like Escape from L.A. that much either.
Oh,
but
well,
I liked Escape from Mars less.
I like Escape from L.A. I love Escape from L.A., but that's because I live here, So
it was too easy for me. That would have been fine if like the first movie had been more like Big Showdown in Little China.
Big Trouble in Little China.
That was Big Trouble in Little China was definitely meant to be fun and campy. But the first Escape from New York was not meant to be like that at all. So I didn't like the campy cheesiness of L.A.
Well, my friends and we used to always quote that line from Cuervo Jones, though, all the time. That was our favorite living here. It's like, you may have escaped Cleveland, or you may have escaped from New York, you may have survived Cleveland, but this is L.A., vato.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I mean, I can see why it would have impact with you. Like living there, it's like, when I remember like watching Wes Craven's Swamp Thing and finding out in the credits that was filmed in South Carolina. I was like, yeah, hey, look at that, man. They're in the cypress swamps. I know that area.
Well, the funny part is, if we're getting a little bit off track, but if you watch Escape from LA, when they do the map and they show where the earthquake split and LA split off, I live right by where the new ocean front is for the United States. So the departure point to go into LA. So
look at that. You got automatic beachfront property.
Yeah, exactly. So, to get back to this movie though, let's talk about the production value. So like I said, this movie came out in the early 80s. Interesting. Last week we talked about Attack the Killer Tomatoes. That movie was done on a $100,000 budget. And you could tell the difference. This movie came out right around the same time. This movie was a $15 million budget. Once again, not a huge budget, but a big, a moderately sized budget for the time. Pretty good amount. And $1.5 million, so a full 10% of their budget was spent just on practical effects. So,
and it shows. The effects artist Rob Bottin went above and beyond the call. As a matter of fact, he worked so hard on this film that he had a breakdown afterwards. This film hospitalized him because he put his heart and soul into it, and he worked day and night. Originally, I believe Rick Baker was head on this movie as special effects artist, but then he got the opportunity with John Landis to do American Werewolf in London, and Rob Bottin was his protege. So Rob stepped in to fill the role for this, and both of them ended up doing Oscar-worthy work on their separate projects.
Yeah, and American Werewolf in London took home several special effects Oscars, if I remember correctly.
It did.
That was really groundbreaking, and then led the way for the Thriller video for Michael Jackson. So used the same stuff. But yeah, so you had great amount of practical work. If you watch the movie, if you watch the trailer, you could see it. we were talking about one of the things that people say turned audiences off. John Carpenter didn't skimp on the gore factor and the shock factor in this movie. And I think it's one of the things that's endeared people to the movie as time has gone on. But for whatever reason, it didn't really connect with the general audience at the time.
Yeah, and just like watching the trailer, I think the trailer is good. But I also feel like watching it because it doesn't have the Carpenter score yet. Carpenter likes to score a lot of his films because he's an amazing composer as well.
Yes,
and
he
so
is.
Because he's scoring, he knows how to score to his visuals. He's probably thinking of music as he's creating the shots. And so, like, I like the music for the trailer, but I found myself missing the Carpenter music for the trailer because I'm so familiar with it. And there's also the problem, I think, that maybe, and I don't know if this was true at the time because I had no trouble finding the film, but there are cases where like a good film just doesn't get good marketing by the studios, and that can be a problem. And I know critics panned it. Siskel and Ebert, I believe, were especially ruthless on it. And then, years later, they would recognize it as a cinematic masterpiece. And, this goes into people's biases at the time. The 80s was an explosion of graphic horror coming from the late 70s forward. And for some people, that had a chilling effect. It became... graphic horror was beginning to be thought of like as sleazy and exploitational, but that's clearly not always the case. And here, everything they put on screen serves the movie. It's all there purposely.
To be completely fair, this was also the time when, quite honestly, there was a lot of pushback from. It was starting to happen early in the 80s and came to the height of its power probably in 1987 something, but it was the religious right. The moral majority was a big thing back then.
Right.
Pushing back. Yeah, they were pushing back on all of this stuff. And it just caused, I'm going to almost say that all these movies took on a cult-like obsession, especially with children. Pushed it. This was right around the time Creepshow came out, which was pushed back on a lot. They wanted to try and cancel Stephen King. So it was cancel culture before it was cancel culture.
Yeah.
So all of this was going on. And I think this movie fit right in that wheelhouse,
Yeah, this was the 80s was time of cancel culture by the right, whereas now it's by the left.
Yeah, definitely. It's weird. It's a bizarre world. You stick around on this earth long enough, you see everything flip around eventually and come back. Everything old is new again.
I'm looking forward to 20 or 30 years later when it's the moderates who are doing all the canceling.
Yeah.
What's that going to look like?
I don't know. That's going to be scary itself. Just to let you know, you were talking about the reviews at the time. Here's some of the taglines used to describe this movie: instant junk, a wretched excess. And it was proposed as be the most hated film of all time by Cinema Fantastique, the magazine. So that's how that movie was described in 1982, 1983.
And that's so disappointing coming from Cinema Fantastique. Carpenter really took this hard. He knew he was doing something great. He knew it. He poured a lot of passion into it. He actually got skin cancer working out there because the intense sunlight bouncing off the snow gave him melanoma. So he suffered a lot, and everybody suffered a lot making this film. I've already told you about Botine's breakdown, and they were dealing with just tremendous inclement weather and the cold weather conditions and the remoteness of the location, having to deal with all that. So everybody worked their asses off on this, and just, to see such a passion project just get dumped on must have been heartbreaking for everybody. But I read Carpenter's feelings on things, and it's one of those things that just about made him want to quit.
Yeah.
He really took it hard.
And they really pulled no punches on this movie. Like you said, it was a passion project. It was a passion project not just for him, but for the cast, who we will talk about in a moment. But it was so much of a passion project that when they filmed it, yes, they did film on location for a lot of the outdoor scenes in Juneau, Alaska. So it's north instead of south. This is supposed to be in Antarctica, but we still get that that frigid landscape and everything. So they actually went there and filmed in Juneau. But when they did stuff on soundstage, they actually did it in refrigerated sound stages, which they lowered to below freezing weather.
Yeah, so like if you weren't outside, you were still freezing inside, and a lot of people got colds.
Yeah.
Because the constant changes of body temperature.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, because this film, it was in LA during the height of summer, so regularly you get up over 100 degrees, even in LA and Hollywood. And yet they were going from there to like 25-degree weather inside of these refrigerated sound stages to actually get the real effect.
See that breath. They need to see the breath on camera.
Mm-hmm. So it was just an amazing thing. And you think about that, this huge sound stage they were keeping at these, freezer-like temperatures in order to film and everything. Yeah. So it had to be hard on it.
Nowadays, you have it easy. Somebody just throw that in there digitally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, okay, here's my question for you. Do you think you would have gotten the same performance from the cast who we're about to talk about if you had done it digitally instead of putting them in the actual conditions?
No, not at all. I am a firm believer of having the on-set experience. Having made a series of films myself, just small films, no budget, but I've watched other filmmakers on YouTube who are very accomplished at visual effects, like the Triune Films, the guys who have the YouTube channel Film Riot. They're very great with visual effects, but it's always more important to have it there. You can react much more genuinely to an environment or a thing that's right there in your face. So like when I look at looking back at, for instance, George Lucas's sequels, which were all done on green screen sound stages, there's no sets, and watching the behind the scenes of these characters walking all this green draped stuff, and thinking back to how like on Empire Strikes Back, they built the Dagobah swamp inside of an airplane hangar, and you just can't get around how much better that was for like Mark Hamill to be trudging around in the muck and the mud and the water versus walking on a soundstage having to pretend everything.
Right. And I think it gets even, I'm not gonna say worse, but harder for actors when you even get rid of the soundstage and you give them everything as green screen.
Yeah.
It becomes even that much more difficult. And it's not to say that it can't be done, but I think that you can get a more visceral performance out of actors a lot of times when you put them in the actual setting.
Absolutely. I mean, like imagine like when Indiana Jones falls into the snake pit, and they had a piece of plexi in between him and the cobra, but there's still a cobra 6 inches from his face, and you're going to react to that viscerally in a way that you're not going to when there's nothing there. It's just like when
same thing with the rats in Indiana Jones 3.
Yeah, it's like, and not to, yeah, I kind of hesitate to bring this up given in light what's happened, but like because of the safety issues, I understand why they still fire guns with blanks, because there's that explosive charge, there's a loud bang, and you react to that even though you know it's about to happen. There's still like a little wince that you don't get if your flashbang is just a digital thing and you're plinking an airsoft gun. And
you also get a real not for anything, it depends on how much you're concentrating on this kind of thing, but you get that real recoil in the shooter's hand. So I mean, there's always a trade-off. I mean, that is a whole other discussion, and it would be interesting one to have. And as that whole story plays out, we got to kind of wait and see where the facts are, because now some stuff is coming out about the production and things like that. So we'll see how that all plays out. But it's obvious. I will say this for anybody out there. Jeff and I have talked about this in private. Weapons, no matter what they are and what they're loaded with, should always be treated as being deadly. So never point them at anybody unless you have taken the proper safety precautions in the case of a film, or you really want to hurt them, because that's just your little PSA here from your Cinema Crusaders.
Man, it's not just firearms. There have been actors who have unfortunately been killed due to blunted bladed weapons. They've still got a pointy end.
Yep, exactly. So real quick, I'm going to give us you a quick tease here for something that's coming up. We'll talk about it, and we're going to get right into the cast. So just quickly, let me show you this. It's only going to be like 10, 20 seconds. Oh. So that is a reminder to all of you that this coming Sunday, Halloween, from 10 a.m. Pacific till 4 a.m. Pacific, we are going to be doing our Halloween Movie Madness Marathon on Discord. On our Twitter channel, look for our invite to the room where we're going to be streaming several different things. We're going to be talking about these movies as they're going on, but we're going to be watching, first of all, the man who directed this film, John Carpenter. We're going to be doing John Carpenter's Halloween. We're also going to be doing Alien from 1978. We're going to be watching the Charlie Brown. It's a Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. We're going to be watching a horror-themed episode of Twilight Zone. And then we may also throw in something from The Outer Limits. We're kind of up in the air now. We're looking at The Outer Limits. We're looking at, or possibly, if we could fit it in for time, we might watch the classic from the 1970s, The Night Stalker. So,
Kolchak?
Yep.
Yes,
so we may do that one. So we're going to see how we're doing on time. If we have to go over a little bit to fit in the Night Stalker, we may do that. So yeah, make sure you check that out. Look for it on Twitter. We're going to be sending out the invites to our Discord channel, and we're going to have giveaways. We've got giveaways of signed novels from Bill Richardson. We got another Day of the Dead shirt to give away on that day. We got a Day of the Dead poster signed by the cast from Sci-Fi Channel to give away. Yeah, so we got some stuff like that to give away, and maybe we can. We're still working on trying to get some other stuff. Oh, we've got comics. We're going to be giving away a horror comic. So yeah, definitely check that out. And we'll be doing all that on Halloween. So look for it. We're going to be advertising it all this week.
Will any of those comics be the Elvira comic?
We are working on that. So Excellent. We're working on that. And I kind of like to talk to Ben to see if maybe we could get some artwork from him as well. See if we can get something digitally. So we'll see if we can do that. We've also got some comics coming from Omen Comics as well. And so we're going to see what we could work out. So, but this is the first of many. This is something, this could be the first time we're going to do it, but we want to do this going into the future. So yeah, join us. And we're going to have a lot of fun watching those movies, talking about them, and doing the giveaways. So I think it's going to be great. All right. So let's get right into the cast. Real quick before we do that, I got another clip from the movie that I thought would be interesting to share, and then we can talk about this, what I consider an all-star cast. I think this is really an amazing cast. So
terrific.
Let's watch this clip for a second. I don't know if we'll watch the whole thing. Just because of YouTube restrictions, but we'll check out a little bit of it. Here we go.
What do you got in mind, McCready?
A little test. And Windows. You and Palmer, tie everybody down real tight.
What for?
For your health.
Come on, let's rush him. He's not gonna blow us all up.
No, wait a minute. Let's do what Max says. I mean, he wasted Norris pretty quick, didn't he?
That's close enough, Clark.
He ain't tying me up.
Then I'll have to kill you, Charles.
Then kill me.
I mean it.
Some great stuff right there. This is great stuff. So let's go ahead and kick it off. Let's take these in batches of 3 because there's so many of them. If we talk about them one at a time, we could be here for a long time. So let's talk about first. Let's go Kurt Russell, who plays McCready. Keith David, who is an absolute legend, playing Childs there. And then Richard Masoura as Clark. And I think Clark is still, it was in this clip. I don't remember right off the top of my head. But those 3, I'm just going to throw my 2 cents.
Yeah, that was Clark as well.
Yeah. First of all, Kurt Russell is just incredible. I've loved Kurt Russell from the time he was in Disney movies, then everything he did after that. Just an amazing actor.
I was a fan of his ever since he was like the strongest boy in the world.
Yeah, and it's funny. I never really thought about it until I started really getting into Carpenter. But he's got a really strong relationship with Carpenter.
Yeah.
He's been in 4 of his movies. He's been in both of the Escape movies. He was in Big Trouble in Little China and The Thing. So
yeah, that's 4 movies.
Yeah. So really. It turns in incredible performances in all of them. You know, Snake Plissken is iconic. His character McCready in this movie is iconic. And then for my money, one of my favorite characters as a kid growing up and still is his character from Big Trouble in Little China. You know,
they're all iconic. I mean, like when the two of them get together, it's like watching Johnny Depp and Tim Burton. There's a certain magic that occurs between the two of them.
Mm-hmm. And they are always on the same page. And it seems like Russell never turns in a bad performance when he's working with John Carpenter. It just doesn't happen, you know. Keith David is an absolute legend in my mind. I mean, the guy, he hasn't very often led films, but he always just fills such important supporting roles in every film he's in. He's really amazing.
And the projects where he really has gotten to lead have both been animated. And if you haven't seen them, those of you out there, check out the HBO Spawn animated series where he played Spawn. And also for Disney, Goliath of the show the show Gargoyles. Brilliant performances both.
I love the Spawn animated series. Yeah, he was amazing at that. It just... I remember watching that on HBO back in the day when it first came out, you know, and I've got it now on Blu-ray. So just incredible. It's what introduced me to Spawn. I got you introduced to Spawn through the HBO series, not through the comics, you know, which is kind of what we're talking about with Ben Templesmith, where he's talking about, you know, the other night. Check out that interview coming up on the channel. Where he was talking about there are a lot of different ways to get people into comics, you know, and we need to be utilizing those.
Oh, and as a brief aside to that interview, the short film that was made from his werewolf series, Welcome to Hoxford, watched it last night. Completely amazing. Well worth checking out. You can find it on YouTube. Welcome to Hoxford movie. Look it up. You'll find it. They really
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, the people involved really paid great homage to Ben's visual style in the film.
Very cool. Yeah, I got to check that out for sure. Who's the third actor? Richard Masoura as Clark.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know this guy's work outside of this movie. I'm not as familiar with it.
Usually, he plays like he's one of these big guys who plays kind of the big kind of happy, dopey, friendly guy. A lot of films that he's done. He never really plays like an intimidating character, although you can see Clark in that clip is intimidating because he is a big man. Yeah. But he comes across often as the gentle giant, and that's the type of characters he often played.
Now, spoiler alert for everyone out there, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think the casting of this man and the character he plays here is so inspired because, like you said, he plays that gentle giant. And he's one of the first ones to be taken over by the Thing and turned. And really gives you...
No, Clark is not a monster.
Oh, that's right. You're right. He ends up being betrayed because it's his dogs that get killed and everything.
Yeah, he's the kennel master.
He really gives you those emotional stakes, though. You know, I thought that this is a character that gave you the emotional stakes in the movie more than anybody else. Everybody else is kind of like either looking out for themselves or trying to survive or... there's such a tremendous debate about who gets taken over first, and purposely on that scene where you see the dog walk into the room of somebody and like looking at the silhouette, I always thought it was a particular character, and then going behind the scenes, I found out that they used somebody who wasn't one of the actors to make that silhouette. So just to totally screw with your head. Yeah, I remember that now. It's been, you know. But that's how much it messes with you because you think it's got to be him. The whole time when you're watching a movie, you're convinced it has to be that character. So, so 3 more. Let's go with Wilford Brimley as Dr. Blair, T.K. Carter as Miles, and David Clennon as Palmer. Now, Wilford Brimley, I want to start with him. This character, I just love his mannerisms.
Yes.
I love the way that he always gives us, I don't even know how to describe it. He plays a certain type of character that always seems to be calculating things with this homespun wisdom to him.
Yeah.
And the first thing I remember from him, because I didn't see The Thing right when it came out, I saw it later on VHS. And before I had seen that, I had seen his performance in Remo Williams, which is
I was going
an
to.
adaptation
Yeah.
of the Destroyer series. Yeah.
Mm.
And I loved him in that as well. So I love Brimley. I think he's really great.
Yeah. You've really hit on the same thing because like I feel like his character in Remo Williams is very similar to this, and like you said, the same thing. He's that guy in the chair. He's the guy who's got the big picture on things, and that's why he was in charge of Cure and the Remo Williams. And here, he's the basically the top ranking guy at the Outpost. You can tell he's got the seniority, that he keeps cool under pressure, and thinking about that, it's very interesting when he has his sort of breakdown in the movie, because the realization that this is the end of the world is something that he tries desperately to fix, but it also breaks him at the same time.
Yeah. He realizes that it's better for them all to die than to let this thing get out into the world. And that's one of the things I love about the John Carpenter in general, but John Carpenter in this movie in particular, is that he doesn't pull any punches. We don't get any easy endings or easy ways out, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit on our last segment about how the ending of this film, it's not sunny and cheerful, and it shouldn't be. That's not the point of this. And too many horror movies, especially modern horror movies, everything gets wrapped up and people walk off into the sunset at the end of the horror movie. And it's like sometimes the best thing you can hope to do in a situation is to try to avoid the worst case scenario. And that's kind of what you get. Maybe.
Like if you're lucky, survival is the best thing you get. And if you're not lucky, kind of breaking even. Like the bad guys don't win, but you don't win either.
Yeah. So what did you think of T.K. Carter as Knowles or David Clennon as Palmer? Two of them supporting characters. For my money, I will say that I preferred Knowles. I got Palmer's character, who was Palmer was also the guy who was in Shades, I believe, the communications guy. I like Knowles' character. Both he and David's, was it? And Keith David's character.
Yeah.
They're not your stereotypical black actor performances in horror movies, which I appreciated as well. So
no, like you're completely right, and I think, like you said, that's why he stands out more. Because the first thing you think, like, if you're going to go stereotypical, like, what's a brother doing out in the freezing cold anyway? Like, that's not where they like to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the fact that Carpenter just does away with all the expected tropes. There's that laughable trope where, like, the black guy is going to die first, that sort of thing. But it certainly doesn't have to be that way, and there's no reason for it to be that way. And really, these two guys make it all the way to the end of the film, he and Childs. So really breaking that convention down. It's just the same thing they did with Alien, where they decided to have the woman make it all the way to the end, which was not standard at the time.
Another disturbing thing about black performances in horror movies a lot of times is that a lot of times they're portrayed as being, dare I say it, almost cowardly. It's almost a little bit. I don't know. I don't want to ascribe motive to it, but sometimes it comes off as a little bit racist. If you want to think about it.
I will say, as somebody who worked in haunted attractions for 10 years, I've seen that black people like buy into that a lot better than white people will. They really enjoy the experience of, like, this is spooky, I'm going to be afraid. And I think there is a cultural aspect to that, even after generations and generations of living in America as Americans and not growing up with like whatever mythology you had from whatever country you might have been from, your forefathers. So I think there's something still there to that, but I also think part of that is I don't always consider it to be cowardly. I think of it more as like there's a deeper sort of common sense survival instinct. Like I recently watched the new Candyman, which is a very black centric film. And one of the most refreshing things I saw is there's like the lead, his wife, is searching for him, and she's looking for him in this place, and she opens up this door, and there's this long stairway into this dark basement, and she just opens up the door and she goes, "Nope," and shuts the door. And I was like, yes.
Well, see, that's a great point. I was just about to say that. I think there's a difference between that pragmatic survivalist approach, and I think Niles is that in this movie. I mean, he definitely is avoiding conflict where he needs to be, but in a lot of other more mainstream horror movies from the 70s, 80s, you'll see the black character just say nope and ditch, even when faced with, having to fight or be killed, whereas in this movie, in particular, when Niles and Childs is a completely different character. Childs is a badass. He's a hard man.
Childs is
but when Niles gets Niles, it's hard to pronounce that name. When he gets put in a situation where he has to fight, where he has to do confrontation, he does it. So that really is the difference, I think, for me. That's
part of that survival. You're backed into a corner. You've got no choice. You do what you have to survive.
Yeah,
and
but I mean,
that realism in the character.
Yeah, but I definitely agree with the trope, and I know I have a lot of friends who are like that. They're like, we'll be playing D&D or something, and be like, and they play themselves when they play D&D. So it's like all of a sudden something comes out, they're like, nope, I'm out of here, gone. So,
good luck.
Yeah. I understand that, and honestly, I'll be honest, my daughters and I watch all the time. We watch a lot of horror movies together, and we'll be like, "What the hell are you doing? Get out of there!" It's like when the ghost tells you to get out of the house, you're like, "Yes, sir, I'm out." Good luck. You can have the house. So,
yep, I'll take the loss on this one.
Yep, exactly. When the mansion goes, "Get out," you're like, "I'm out. Bye." So let's see, 3 more. Let's do Richard Dysart as Dr. Cooper, or Copper, excuse me. Charles Hallahan as Vance, who was his assistant, and then Peter Maloney as George Bennings. And I think he was one of the first people to get taken over. I think he's the one that dies out in the snow, and they end up burning him up as he's in mid-transformation.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember like who is who by name. Dr. Copper, I always like that character. He's the gentleman playing him is a great character actor. Seen him in a million things. So he's a fun character. He's a little bit of a standout for me, even though he doesn't have like the biggest role as Gary, but he's just one of those guys who's always been very watchable to me. And I think he turns in a good performance with the understanding that he's not the lead of the piece, even though this is largely an ensemble. There's clearly, Charles and McCready drive a lot of the action. But it's still important that this is an ensemble film, even if you've got a couple of people who are very clearly the alpha males in the room, if you will. So I appreciate his work, and I like the fact that like Gary thinking that he might be compromised, turned over leadership. That was an important move.
He's definitely he gives off the more academic vibe. So you contrast it against Dysart, who is the other thinker in the film. His character. Dr. Copper is the one who is the academic who's trying to evaluate everything very carefully and do scientific research. And unfortunately, it ends up costing him his life, when he's doing the autopsy and everything. So which goes right into another character.
All right, I'm already getting the characters confused. I was thinking of the tall, skinny actor, as opposed to the doctor who does the has the unfortunate experience when
Well,
when someone has a heart attack.
yeah, you have Charles Hallahan as Vance, and I think, to be honest with you, I mean, he has a good performance in this movie, but he's probably best known for, what I'm using up. You look at above my head there. That's a prosthetic of his face when he becomes the monster, one of the monsters in the movie, as Vance. So, and transforms because the thing took him over. Other than that, I mean, I don't want to be unfair to him as his performance, but I think he's there as a character who is supposed to lead into being eventually taken over. And he's a gentle character, and so that makes his transformation, I think, into a monster that much more jarring.
Yeah, like like you said, he was definitely that very unassumingly kind of nice, kind of everyman sort of guy. And when he goes, you don't think it's going to be horrific because you think, oh, he's just got a heart problem, because he's a little bit overweight, that sort of deal. The actor playing Bennings, he didn't really get to do all that much, but what he did is he filled in the background, and he didn't phone it in, but his role was just small.
No, and I mean, and to be fair to him, I don't want to say that you typecast people on their face or whatever, but I think it was good casting because he's got the type of face that looks like that unassuming, nice man.
Now, what do you think about the guy who played Windows?
Windows was Thomas G. Waits, right?
I don't have the list in front of me.
Yeah, Thomas Waits. All right, this is gonna be.
I asked this question because I think he's the first person taken over, and that's why I asked the question. I do. I think he's the first guy to get it, and I think the brilliance of this is they state that the thing, even when it multiplies, each creature considers itself an individual, not part of a whole. So it's not a hive mind sort of creature. Each one's out for itself, even if it means screwing over their own. And if you think about Windows being that guy, that silhouette in the room that the dog goes into, if he's the first one to go, rewatch it with that in mind and get a perspective on that, because it's a pretty deep dive. And there was a thing they supposedly did, kind of like with Blade Runner, that they would show like a little bit of like an eye shine sort of thing to show you who was a replicant and who wasn't.
Right.
The idea with the cinematography here is they wanted to make sure there were no lights in the eyes, so to show a lack of humanity, like, so there's no eye shine, no reflections in the eyes. And thinking back on where they have the blood test scene, and it comes to Windows' turn, and the actor does this really cool thing where he's sitting there waiting his turn, and they focus in on him. And he's like not really looking at anybody, and there's no highlight in his eyes, and he just takes a little swallow because he knows the jig is up.
Mm-hmm.
He knows the jig is up.
I agree with you that I think Windows was the first character, but I was thinking more of the character itself in the movie. And the thing that I got from Windows that I think is so brilliant is that you look at the cast and who they put, the different roles they put people in. So you have Garrett, the character of Gary, who we'll talk about a little bit, who's kind of like that bumbling military person in charge.
Yeah, the ineffectual leader.
Yeah, and then you've got the doctor, you've got the plotter, you've got the problem solver / survivalist in Kurt Russell's character, you've got the hard ass in David's character. You've got different archetypes. And then out of all these people in the middle of Antarctica, you've got a conspiracy theorist who is wearing mirrored glasses. And they established his conspiracy theory bona fides early on in the movie. He doesn't like the government. He doesn't trust the government. He's got all these thoughts on aliens and everything else. I mean, he is an outlier.
But he's out in the middle of nowhere doing government research.
Exactly. But I think it's so brilliant because I agree with you. He's the first one to get taken over. And when he does, natural, whatever. If he is taken over, his behavior, where he's self-isolating, where he's distrusting of everybody else, where he doesn't want to be close to them, could be explained, to the character he's playing as well, which gives you that deniability of whether or not is he been taken over, or is this just a conspiracy theorist being a conspiracy theorist? So I think it's really brilliant writing.
And I have to wonder about that, because we know that the alien creature is highly intelligent. So thinking with that in mind, that Windows is the first one taken, and the dogs had the run of the camp for several hours before it makes its move.
Mm-hmm.
Did it pick him because he was the loner?
It's possible.
I mean, Carpenter does so many great subtle things. Like there was that whole issue with how did somebody get into the locker to sabotage the blood when they when they wanted the blood serum test, and he doesn't show it. And I had to watch another video to pick up on this, because I've watched several videos dissecting this movie over the years, and when the guy goes back in there and he's got the keys to the locker and he sees Bennings being taken over, you don't see him drop the keys because the framing is up here, but you hear something hit the floor and he dropped the keys. Yes,
I gotta go back and watch that.
And that's how the thing got into the locker and to spoil the blood, is he ran to tell everybody he dropped the keys, because nobody had the keys after that. They were just gone.
Interesting. So, okay, let's get to I think the last character that really, there's some really minor characters I don't even remember that well. Like George Bennings' character, or Peter Maloney plays George Bennings, who is a guy who is like mid-transformation and they burn him out in the snow. Mm-hmm. But I think the big one is Donald Moffat as Gary. So that ineffectual leader type.
Yeah, and that's who I was mistakenly talking about earlier. Instead of Dr. Copper. I got it crossed up in my brain for some reason.
For whatever reason, this guy is really good in that role as well. He played the president who was basically an amoral, useless piece of garbage in Harrison Ford's Clear and Present Danger, the Jack Ryan. He was also in The Right Stuff.
The course of action I'm going to suggest is a course of action I cannot suggest.
Yeah, exactly. He just this and obviously this movie, The Thing, came before that. So I'm pretty sure that they saw his performance here and then ended up casting him in The Right Stuff as Lyndon Johnson, and then later on as the president in Clear and Present Danger, because he plays this character.
He's a great character actor.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a couple of modes he can get into, and he can slip them on like a comfortable glove, and he's got that down pat.
Yeah, and he's really good at it. Once again, he's one of these characters where I don't ever remember him as a leading character, but as a supporting character, a character actor, he's really, really good. You know, and can bring a lot to your film. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of actors that make entire careers like that. And I think that what he brings to this movie is very important, because he's trying to assert authority at certain points, and he really is not a natural leader. The natural leader here is either David's character, which is, I got to go back and look at it. Childs. It's either Childs or McCready. Those are the two natural leaders.
The thing I liked about his character is he realized when he wasn't the right guy for the job, and he turned the authority over. And a lot of these other characters he would have played wouldn't have done that, and that makes that endears this character so much more to me, because he is that guy. He realized he was compromised. He was in over his head, and instead of being out for himself, which is why we ultimately win against the Thing, if you will, and this also holds true in the novel, is because even though the Thing is this conglomerate that creates individuals, but we are individuals who come together, and that's what allows us to defeat the Thing.
To be honest with you, this character reminds me an awful lot of another character that would show up in 86, which is Gorman from Aliens. Lieutenant Gorman.
Yes.
really reminds me of
another guy who was ineffectual, but at the end he steps up.
Yeah, and realizes he's ineffectual, and then plays the role that he should be playing. So he steps aside and plays a different role. So to their credit, they redeem themselves. So and once again, the guy, I don't remember who played Gorman in Aliens, but very good in that role, and playing that guy who is in over his head, but eventually realizes it and makes the right choice. So, all right. So, wow, I think that was a great discussion of the cast. Let's jump right in then into this movie for modern audiences, but let's go back and talk about how this movie was perceived when it came out, what your thoughts are on that, and why it has become a loved cult classic going forward. And now, I mean, there are a lot of magazines and industry experts who will say that this is one of the best, if not the best, horror/science fiction movies of all time. So what changed?
I legitimately think it's one of the just best movies of all time. I mean, it is really a masterclass. It's a genre film, but I think it's one of those films that goes beyond just the sci-fi horror genre. It's also a tremendous thriller. It's a whodunit. It's a mystery. It's got so much going for it. I mean, you could take out the element of the monster, and you could say you could play with it and say oh, what if we've got some sleeper agents? If you want to do like a Cold War kind of scenario, what if one of us is a serial killer? Who's hiding in plain sight. There's a lot of ways you could do it, and this film still works on that premise with many of the same elements going into it. It's brilliantly done. It's Hitchcockian in its setup and delivery, and I can't say enough good things about it. And it's a film I keep going back to for the sake of enjoyment and also study. There's so many brilliantly subtle things that Carpenter does. Not just the dropping of the keys out of sight, but when they're setting up for their last defensive position, and they slowly pan to each character in their different spots, and it's so meticulously purposeful. You see Keith David, he's got his flamethrower and he's waiting by this door before they end up having to go underground and blow up everything, and it pans over to this stairway leading to a door, this unguarded door. And the next time we come across that scene, Keith David isn't there, which will lead to the ambiguousness of the end. And so there's it's just breathtaking how smart this movie is. And it's a travesty and a tragedy that it was so maligned early on. I think people were just not ready for that level of FX, even though. And the ironic thing is, a werewolf tearing people to pieces got the Oscar, whereas this movie had just effects that were so strange. I think that's the problem. We didn't see that much visceral gore happening in American Werewolf in London. We'd see the aftermath usually, the people all kind of torn up. It was the transformation was so macabrely fascinating that people will dial into that, but that's still something we could sort of relate to. The thing, it was so far beyond any sort of cultural context at the time. This thing that just oozed and transformed in all these bizarre and grotesque ways. I think the critics just, it was a big paradigm shift and they couldn't handle it, and they lost sight of the bigger picture because of that, and that's really unfortunate.
I hear everything you're saying, and I agree with it. I think there's another aspect to this as well, which is that every movie, every piece of art, period, is dependent not only on the skill level and and what it actually goes into it, how well it's made, but also when it's released. And what it means. And you go back to 1982, we were just coming out of a recession. Honestly, it wasn't that long since the height of science fiction, what you would call the Alien or the B-level science fiction movies of the 50s and 60s, so maybe there was some audience fatigue in there, but you also look at what was popular and what hit with audiences and what bombed with audiences in 1982. So let me throw this out there for you real quick. And,
the
and I think
80s, the 80s was definitely the part of the big slasher craze, and like this
yeah.
was way far away from any of that.
But science fiction films themselves. So Blade Runner came out in 1982, panned and did horribly, and it had that same kind of tone, the same kind of message and realistic. I'm not going to say depressing, but I'm going to say realistic view at what a possible future was, a different kind of science fiction. Yeah. Another science fiction movie that came out in 1982 and was a huge hit, E.T., the Extraterrestrial. You couldn't go 180 degrees if you or 180 degrees if you wanted.
I remember like Carpenter talking about that as well, and it's like we ended up being up against E.T. and it's like you got the at the time the cutest alien possible versus the most disgusting alien possible. Right. How were we ever gonna like compete with that?
So but I will say how this movie translates to modern audiences. I think that this movie could only have gotten more popular with modern audiences for a lot of reasons. Number one of which is, and I think modern audiences are more in tune with the idea of A, the possibility that aliens might be real, and B, if we ever run into an alien life form, it's not necessarily going to be what we think it is and or friendly. And then on top of that, whatever your feelings are about climate change, that is definitely out there. And so this thought of things being unearthed from the ice and posing dangerous threats to humanity also resonates, I think, with modern audiences quite a bit. So I don't know that the public in 82 was looking for this kind of stuff. They were looking for happier things, or they were looking for more idealistic science fiction as well. So another movie that was incredibly popular in 1982, Star Trek Wrath of Khan. Star Trek itself is especially that version of Star Trek, and that's a whole other discussion that we'll table for another time. But that version of Star Trek was very idealistic. So even when things were bad, badly for the crew, like in Wrath of Khan, they were trying to uphold the ideals of the Federation, I think, and all of that, which very much resonated with
it. Still works. Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future is incredibly optimistic, incredibly hopeful, incredibly passionate that we will become the best that we can be. And even at the end with Khan, you see that there's death, but there's this rebirth in Kurt. He's finding a new purpose in life. Not to get too far off of it, but this, like I said, this film is a part of a series that Carpenter would do. He calls it his Apocalypse series, and I think that's kind of important that this is the first film. And if you look at the three films in context, you have The Thing from Another World, Prince of Darkness, and then finally In the Mouth of Madness.
Oh God,
yeah, something to talk about some other time. But I feel like in The Thing we win. We save the day at a cost. Mm-hmm. In the Prince of Darkness, it seems like we win, but also there's a possibility that the guy at the end is about to screw it up. And then by the time we get to In the Mouth of Madness, we just lose. The world is over. And so I'd love to talk to Carpenter sometime about the progression of like, was this your kind of commentary on the world or Hollywood or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, I just think it's really interesting that how art and how it's received really depends on the time in which it's released. I think that had a lot to do with why this movie wasn't as well received back then, and I think Star Trek is a perfect litmus test. For whether you like modern Star Trek or not, I don't think that it's unfair to say that modern Star Trek is kind of a reflection of the sensibilities of a lot of society around it. Maybe not the hardcore fans, but the way that Star Trek has changed and become darker and less idealistic and everything, I think really reflects a lot of what's going on in society, for good or bad. So
that's why you should watch Orville.
What's that? Yeah.
That's why you should watch Orville.
So
make you happy again.
Wow. this is just a great discussion on the thing. Thank you very much. This has been wonderful.
Well, it's
So
my pleasure. This is one of my all-time favorite movies. I can go miles deep on this one. Like I said, I've watched it so many times. I've watched amazing discussions on it. I've watched all sorts of behind-the-scenes stuff, and just there are just so many things that came together perfectly that even if it didn't find its place when it was made, fortunately, it did not become a lost film. That is a film that has definitely earned its accolades over time as people have, gotten curious enough to go back and take a look at it and see, like, wow, this is really an amazing piece of filmmaking.
I watch this movie at least a couple times a year. I watch it so often that I wore out my original VHS version I had of it. I had to get another one, and then got it on DVD, then Blu-ray. So yeah, I watch this movie a lot. It is one of my favorites. So with that said, let's go ahead and give this a Cinema Crusaders rating. What would you rate this movie out of 10?
This is another rare one, because this is a film that I just, having looked at it so many times, I can't find any faults with it. I can't find any plot holes. Everything just works. I'm going to have to go 10 out of 10.
Okay.
And not something I like to do. I rarely believe something is perfect. I'm sure Carpenter could point out a million things that are wrong. But as a viewer of the film, to me, it's one of those examples of as close to perfect a film as you can get.
So I would be inclined to agree with you. I don't often give 10s. I'm going to give this movie a 9.5. And the only reason I give it a 9.5 is because when I watch the movie now, and, in 2021, I think to myself, man, I would love to see John Carpenter be able to remake this movie back in 1982, but with modern technology, with drone cameras and the ability, more the new practical effects that they have come up with, all of that stuff, and be able to him even more fully realize his vision.
I know.
So
That's part of what makes the prequel they did such a shame, because I was looking forward to that story of seeing what happened in the Norwegian camp. And Studio ADI did some absolutely amazing practical effects, and then some suit decided he didn't like the practical effects, and they replaced all of their work with CGI, and everybody went to see the film noticed right away. And that's one of the things that got lambasted about that film the most, is the rushed CGI on something that was iconically practically affected.
Or some of the drone cameras they use, and their ability to be able to do stuff with that would have been amazing from high level shots, because when you're doing a lot of those high level panoramic shots, you have to do from a helicopter and it's from a certain angle. You could have gotten much lower and zoomed in and done things like that. You could have used a GoPro camera on the dog to give you a dog's point of view.
Oh man, that was back when I was making films just for my whole group of little filmmaking partners split up. I was looking to invest in a drone, and one of the last ones I was looking at the time was one called the Mavic. Very small, very portable drone, and there's some programmable features. If you're a skilled pilot, you could just have this little thing fly this beautifully stabilized flight, because they've got those in the camera setups on them now, and it could just fly a short, tight circle around you. And so, like, you weren't having to lay down like a tripod on a dolly track and run around and have to worry about like your shadow getting cast on the ground and like kind of messing up the scene like that. It's amazing what you can do with the technology nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, and just even think about some of the tracking scenes. So like the end scene where the whole camp is burning, you could have started up top with the drone and have it move down below Kurt Russell's face and look up at him while the highlight of the camp burning is there. And so you had, just some of the shots that frame him in the burning buildings and everything would have been absolutely amazing, and have it just as one smooth tracking shot instead of having to cut and do things like that. So you could have done some incredible things. Not to take anything away from this movie, but now when I watch it, I think, man, if John Carpenter had this technology it would have been even that much better. So for that reason, I would give it a 9.5, which is still a really good rating, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a 9.75 from us. IMDb, 8.1 out of 10, still a very high rating for IMDb. And that's 394,000 people rating the film. So not many movies get much higher than that. I don't know. I think the highest rated movie on IMDb is like an 8.7 or something like that. So,
okay.
Yeah, it's got a good rating on IMDb. So we're a little ahead on this one, but I think that because we've grown up with this film, I think it really holds a dear place in our heart as well. So I think
it does, but you know, I'm also taking it from every objectively technical aspect I can, from direction to performance to cinematography to music to themes. It's brilliant.
And I think a lot of I've seen reaction videos from modern viewers, and they like the movie, but when you compare it to some of the modern shots, modern practical effects, or modern CGI, you know, depending on how you feel about it, I think they're evaluating it in that light as well. And I think you need to really look and evaluate the movie based on what they could do at the time. So,
oh, sure. I mean, it's like when we were looking back at Dracula, we liked Dracula, but like, there's the rubber bat on the string.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So, thank you very much for being here with me. I think it's a great podcast.
I'm glad I got to talk about this film in particular.
Yeah. So this is going to wrap up this kind of podcast for this month for Halloween Movie Madness. We've done Dracula, we've done Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and we did this film. Make sure you check all three of those out on Cinema Crusaders. Next Sunday, we're going to be on Discord, and we're going to be doing our Halloween movie marathon. And look for that. We're going to be advertising that on Twitter. We're going to have giveaways and everything. Make sure you check it out. So, on behalf of myself and Jeffrey, Jeffrey.
You
Jeff,
told me F.A.
F.A. The Hefe. I want to say thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.